NASA's November 19th live stream about the interstellar object 3I-ATLAS was supposed to be a moment of clarity. Instead, it became a masterclass in concealment in plain sight. Officials spoke for hours, but their words formed a perfect vacuum, full of sound, devoid of information. The images shown were so blurry and distant they could have depicted anything. Data collected by 20 spacecraft was, according to NASA, still being processed, calibrated, or awaiting confirmation. But the loudest signal wasn't in the data, it was in the intonation. The phrase, "it's just a comet," was repeated with such methodical consistency that it began to sound not like a statement of fact, but like an incantation designed to ward off curiosity. When the broadcast ended, a heavy feeling lingered in the air. We were shown not the object, but the ritual of its concealment. Sometimes, silence becomes the loudest part of the message. The structure of this briefing was surgically precise. It began not with discoveries, but with refuting rumors and speculation. Before showing anything, the panel of experts methodically built a wall of caveats. Comets behave like this. Dust is released like that. Nothing unusual. They moved along a pre-drawn circle, avoiding any hints of deviation. Mentions of Hubble, James Webb, Lucy, and Psyche were used not as harbingers of discovery, but as elements of an impressive yet empty list. Every mention of an instrument came with a disclaimer: pushed to their limits, non-ideal angle, requires calibration. This wasn't a scientific review, it was a long list of reasons why they could not show what everyone was waiting for. Their even, almost impassive tone was the perfect tool to lull any intrigue without raising direct suspicion. The most telling aspect was not the meager material presented, but what they carefully glossed over. In passing, they mentioned anomalous chemical ratios, an excess of nickel to iron, strange dust polarization, a composition suggesting a possible origin in a system older than our Sun. Each of these facts is a bombshell capable of overturning understandings of planetary system formation. But instead of unpacking them, the speakers delivered them like a tongue twister and immediately returned to safe ground. They admitted that some spacecraft had to maneuver into unplanned positions to capture the object, leading to glare and artifacts. This sounded like a preemptive excuse in case this raw data ever leaks and shows not a perfect comet, but something else. They didn't deny the existence of the data, they emphasized its volume, but immediately explained why it couldn't be released. This cat-in-a-sack routine created a strange dissonance. NASA insisted on the object's ordinariness, but its own actions screamed the opposite. The climax of the broadcast was not a breakthrough, but a ritualized call for patience. Wait for the analysis. Trust the process. The data will come later. But the time frames remained deliberately vague. This pattern is familiar from past epoch-making events, when institutions preferred to prepare the public before disclosing inconvenient truths. The impression was created that the collected information is so vast and complex that it's easier to quarantine it under the pretext of avoiding panic than to risk showing the raw, unfiltered data. Their caution resembled not scientific scrupulousness, but a containment strategy. They weren't just reporting facts, they were managing a narrative. And that narrative was, everything is under control, nothing to see here, move along. When speakers answered direct questions about Atlas's unusual characteristics, their language became a barrier. Phrases like, too early to tell, uncertain, requires further verification, served as a universal key, unlocking a door to a dead end. They acknowledged non-thermal radiation, non-gravitational accelerations, complex core morphology, but immediately packaged this into the wrapper of standard cometary activity. It was a linguistic trick, naming parts of an unknown whole with familiar terms to neutralize their strangeness. The most eloquent moment came when, describing the object's possible origin in a system older than the Sun, they didn't pause for even a second to emphasize the monstrous scale of that statement. This indifference to their own sensational claims seemed staged. The fear of speculation forced them to abandon not only interpretation, but wonder itself. By the end of the broadcast, it became clear. The real message was nonverbal. It lay in what was left unsaid, what was not shown, which questions were dodged. NASA essentially demonstrated not the object, but the protocol for handling it. A protocol based on containment, filtration, and the metering of information. The fact that an unprecedented armada of instruments observed this object only highlights the grotesquerie of the situation. The more eyes were pointed at it, the less distinct it became in the public sphere. ATLAS turned into a perfect screen for projection. For scientists, it's a comet. For skeptics, a rock. For conspiracy theorists, a probe. But for NASA itself, it became a test on the ability to speak while saying nothing, and they passed this test with distinction. The silence they created is now an integral part of the ATLAS phenomenon. This is not an absence of data, this is the data itself. When the broadcast ended, viewers were left not with images or facts, but with a heavy, unresolved dissonance. The official version, just a comet, hung in the air, finding no support in the meager data presented. The most interesting parts remained off-screen, in the hints about chemical composition, in the whisper about its age, in the suggestion of a trajectory that refuses to fit ready-made models. This silence is not a pause in the dialogue, it is the main text. It speaks louder than any statement. We don't yet understand what this is ourselves, and we are not ready to share our guesses. If you feel the weight of this unspoken message, if you are interested in what hides in the cracks between official statements, this channel is for you. Subscribe to explore these shadows together, and put a like so this signal reaches those who listen not only to the words, but also to the pauses between them.